tell you what.
Nathan, we are on episode 93. We're about what? We're 9 away from the 2-year mark.
Oh, are we really?
Yeah, I think that's going to be like episode. Oh no, maybe 11.
It's in like July or August, I thought.
Something like that. Well, 11 episodes. Yeah,
that's coming up.
Well, still got a while, but anyways, anything fun this weekend? What are you doing with your any snake updates for your breeding?
For my breeding?
Yeah, breeding season.
Stuff doesn't really start, getting fed heavy over here until September.
Okay. Yeah, my wild-caught Calicoa we don't start pairing until like September-ish, and
I guess we could try. There's a winter storm coming in, so anything's possible.
That's what I was about to say. My wild-caught female, she did not go last year, and because of all of these storms that we've been having, and maybe El Nino, I dangled a rabbit in front of her face for like 15 seconds before she decided to bite it. And I was like, whoa, this is way too early for you.
Oh, no, I think they'd all still be readily taking that rabbit.
Yeah, no, she's just like, she looked at it. And then like, I swear she turned her head and looked at me and I was like, food, like take it. It was so weird. But yeah, so who knows what's going to happen with that. But
okay.
Episode 83, we're actually not doing the whole breeding stuff. We're going to focus
83.
Is it 80? Oh, no, 93. Jeez.
Yep,
I'm
93.
stumbling all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good thing that we do these pre-recorded, even though I'm probably going to leave that bit in there, but
when do we ever edit anyway?
Yeah. But
so
go for it.
Do we want to jump into the little bit of content?
Yeah, let me. I want to introduce the episode, and then we'll jump into that. Just so people are like, "What the hell's going on?" Episode 93. We are going to be having one of our newer Patreon members, Katherine Brumwell. She is a brand new reticulated python keeper, Superdorf reticulated python keeper. She joined our Patreon back in about January. She didn't have her first retic yet, and this is one of our reverse interview segments, and she has a list of questions that she's going to ask us as a brand new retic keeper. And I'm excited. Nathan, we were on the phone the other day and you mentioned like wanting to do a lot more pet focused retic content. And I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that there's so much opportunity for people that are just, within their first ball python, their first corn snake to, venture out and find a new show, that kind of thing. So I want to be able to cater to that audience as well.
Yeah. And, if we're being honest, most of the breeders in the retic community look at us and our, little experience of breeding compared to some of these, vets that have been doing it 15, 20 years, and they think we're already irrelevant. So might as well cater to the pet people a lot more, right?
Well, and we've always come at this, well, at least, that's what we've always said, is come at this with just an experience-based show. So
right. But before we bring her on, we had another Patreon member decide to get a little fun with AI, and were you able to get it to where it will work?
It says it's going to share the audio, so if this doesn't work, then you guys are just going to see a cut right into Katherine. So
exactly. But what I will say is he had he put it into an AI like rap or I guess music program, and there's an AI rap song that was made about the Retic Lounge. So we're going to listen to this before we bring Katherine on, just because why not?
So I was telling Lucas, just really quick before we do this, I watch Your Mom's House podcast with Tom Segura and Christina P every week, and they have songs submitted like this all the time, just based off content they've shared on the podcast or clips or whatever. And It's kind of cool to have one thrown our way. So yeah, let's
Yeah.
jump in.
It's,
All right, is it showing on your end now?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay, good deal. Let's play.
Welcome to the jungle, the Retic Lounge.
It sounds like the game. Like the rapper of the game.
Welcome to the jungle, the Retic Lounge domain, where Lucas and Nathan reign with serpents in their veins. Patterns in the spotlight, each scale tells a story with reticulated pride. Bask in reptile glory, snake king cold rings, slithering in time. In our Eden of serpents, every species in its prime. From carpet beauties to green, their colors never fade. In this herpetology shrine, it's more than just a trade. Down at the Retic Lounge, where the snakes entwine. Lucas and Nathan chill, pythons on their mind. Reticulated patterns, they're the breathing kind. Carpet beauties, green trees in the spotlight, they shine. Breathing serpents in my domain like Wayne. I set the habitat, no stress, no pain. My love for scales is not about the fame. I tint my snakes, I know each by its name. Snakes on deck, my reps intact maintain. Cold-blooded homies in the terrarium reign. In their glass kingdoms, they coilin' rest. Lucas and Nathan, they know what's best. They know what's best. Conversations on Discord, sharing tips and tales. In this serpent community, camaraderie prevails. At the Retic Lounge, it's a reptile fest. With reticulated pythons, that's simply the best.
All right. Let's give it up for AI.
Snake Boy Adam inputting all that as well. Lucas, I like that it picked up your incessant want to bring green trees on the podcast.
I was hoping it wasn't going to. I'm already getting some Patreon members kind of riled up about it. But man, that dude, I'm sorry. Just for a second. I mean, I thought it was hilarious. I also thought some parts of it are pretty actually impressive for AI, but can we talk for a second about how scary AI is becoming?
Yeah, it's a little terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, all the Kendrick AI stuff that comes out. And
oh yeah.
the Drake AI stuff. It's weird.
Yeah. Like who knows if their beef right now is even real beef or if it's AI generated, right?
It's just AI fighting with each other.
Right, exactly. Meanwhile, like Kendrick Lamar and Drake are like smoking a joint together. Like just okay. Man,
Thank
was
you,
good.
Snake Boy Adam. We appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Even that little like nod at Discord at the end. I love that.
Right. Yeah. Camaraderie prevails. That was nice. All right. Why don't we get Katherine on here?
Let's do it.
Whether you've poured your heart and soul into your reptile business or you've just begun your business journey, AE Foundry has you covered with next level expertise in graphic design, motion graphics, videography, photography, and so much more. If you've been dying for a new logo for your reptile business, motion graphics for your current logo, a new website, or need assistance making your video podcast come to life, then listen carefully. AE Foundry's mission places storytelling at its core. AE Foundry believes that a distinctive story and background are the driving forces that set your brand apart. In today's market, consumers seek more than just products. They crave a connection built on trust with the brands they cherish. AE Foundry is committed to empowering small businesses and fostering authenticity that resonates with their consumers. Reach out to them and let them help you craft a visual narrative that helps establish a genuine and lasting connection with your audience. To contact AE Foundry, email them at aromero@aefoundry.com or on Instagram at AE Foundry. When it comes to housing your retics, trust me, you're going to want an enclosure that will be just as strong and durable as your reticulated python. The Heartland Reptile enclosure is next level tough and will outlive you and your retic by several generations. Heartland Reptile enclosures are designed and manufactured out of powder-coated aluminum to provide the highest quality and longevity available in the reptile enclosure. What makes them even better is they are lighter than your PVC and plastic enclosures out there and are extremely tough. Stop playing around with plastic enclosures for your large constrictors and step up your enclosure game with the Heartland Reptile enclosure. To inquire about one of these enclosures, speak to Jordan himself at Heartland Reptiles on Instagram, Facebook, and on TikTok. Here on TRL, we preach about the importance of using hooks, feeding tongs, and other tools with your reticulated python all the time. Animal Equipment by Stony not only has all the tools you need for any snake you keep, but they have the absolute best hooks on the market. What sets Animal Equipment by Stony's hooks apart from the other guys is their polycarbonate hook ends that provide a warm feel that won't disturb or bother your retic, ensuring a positive interaction from the get-go. Since 2008, AE Stony has been supplying zoos, herpetologists, and other animal professionals with their tools. It's time for you to step your hook game up and buy an AE Stony hook. To learn more and purchase one of their amazing products, visit aestony.com. I wonder if she's cracking up backstage, but let's go ahead and bring her on.
Hey guys.
What's up, Catherine?
Hey,
Oh
Catherine.
my God. I don't think I can top that. I wish I'd listened to that earlier so it wasn't just a complete shock. I don't even know which line is my favorite.
Right.
Incredible.
I'm going to see if we can get the rights to that and tie that into the intro somehow.
I was going to say,
I think you have to.
Sounds like he's coming after our intro song, but he's going to have to fight Bill Murray for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry, Bill Murray. Oh, man. Anyways, appreciate you for joining us. And I know that it's a little late in the evening and always like to thank our guests that make the time later. But anyways, if you don't mind, I know that we talked a little bit about you at the beginning, but go ahead and kind of just kick us off with who you are in reptiles.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, thank you guys for doing this. I feel very unqualified to be on a show talking about reptiles, but I guess that's also kind of the entire point of this episode.
Well, we're very unqualified to have a podcast in the beginning, so welcome.
We're still working on it.
Everyone gets a podcast now. It's all good.
Exactly.
So I will try not to make my animal backstory like excessively long, but I have always been like, I was always that kid that was like super fascinated with animals. I read every single animal book I could get my hands on. You know, every book had to be about animals, regardless of what class it was for. As my husband puts it, I was the bug girl. I definitely went through a pretty big stage where I was very seriously considering going into entomology.
Awesome.
My dad was a veterinarian, so animals have always been a big thing. I did a lot of like 4-H with my family dog growing up. So we always had dogs and cats. My dad was very into tropical fish, but reptiles were not something that I ever had growing up. My parents were understandably a little hesitant to jump into it, especially with the environment requirements and all that. And just very recently got into them. Weirdly, the thing that kind of spurred the whole thing is I work at a gym that had this big open garage door, and during the summer, these adorable little lizards would crawl in. And last summer, a few of my coworkers and I were kind of scooping these guys up, and I was like, man, it is just so relaxing to interact with these animals. I'm like, maybe having reptiles is something I should reconsider now that I'm in a more, I'm in my, for lack of a better term, like forever home. I'm going to be here for a long time. And then immediately went into research mode, which is a fairly aggressive thing for me. I'm pretty sure I watched all of the Clint's reptile videos just to kind of get a feel for what I could potentially handle. Went with the classic ball python.
I feel like I watch those still. Like I still like he'll post the his 5 categories and the rating, and I still every single time I see one comes up, I'm like, play.
And I'm spoiled. I got Clinton teaching at our local reptile shows.
Since
I got he is right near you.
Yeah, he's just a little down south of me, and we have a Wasatch reptile and invertebrate show. It's actually this weekend. And Clint is always out there, always teaching. So I got spoiled.
Rub it in. Actually, we have Reptilandia here, so at least I have that.
I would love to meet him. I think I just love like the pure joy of just like, these are really incredible animals, and we're very fortunate to get to interact with them. And I just love that energy. So
right.
I made the classic choice of going with a ball python. I was really charmed by short tails also. I was really convinced I was going to get a blood python next or a Sumatran. And then one fateful day, I went to the Kansas City Reptile Show and went and saw Heartland Reptiles and was handed a baby retic.
Shout out to our sponsor.
All it takes
Yes.
with a retic is that touch, and you're done.
It's just interacting with them, especially and
Yes.
again, not to talk down ball pythons because they're beautiful. They come in every color on the rainbow, and they're awesome animals.
I was in this position. It was the same thing.
It's just especially when you own a ball python and you interact with it, and then you interact with a retic. It's like, oh, like this is like a real snake.
It's very different, and I feel like I appreciate them both in different ways. But I will definitely say, like, as soon as I held the retic, it was over. My husband was there with me, and he goes, I know we're going to get one of those now. And I was like, yeah, probably. Because I mean, to be fair, when I started learning about different species of snakes and trying to kind of figure out what would be a good match, I mean, it's hard not to just be really wowed by the retics, and, obviously I watched all the like reach out reptile stuff, and I was just like, okay, this is just like the biggest, baddest snake you can have. This is so cool, but it's not something that I can, reasonably keep.
Right.
But then I, discovered the Retic Lounge and was at first just like, oh, I'll just learn more about them because they're really cool. And then realizing like, oh, one of the smaller varieties of these might actually be a little more in my skill set than I thought. So here we are.
A little bit of reptile knowledge, and I feel like anyone could grow with a retic. Not necessarily just get an adult.
Grow with a retic.
Yes.
Yeah. And one thing at least this was my experience, and I talk to a lot of people on a weekly basis that, ask me questions, whatever the case may be. And other people's experience as well is, a lot of people go into this and they're like, I need the smallest retic that I could possibly find. And then, 5 years down the road and I'm still talking to them and, they're like, the snake could be 20 foot and I would love it. Like, and it would be great. And it's just one of those things that when you grow with a baby retic, and you learn its nuances, its behaviors, those kind of things, the only more difficult part about, it just being larger and larger is convincing it that it's time to go back in its enclosure. Because sometimes they don't want to do that. And of course, dragging a 15-foot snake is a lot harder than placing a 9-foot snake back in its enclosure. But I let me ask you, so about how long did you do your retic research for?
Trying to think exactly. Honestly, it was probably close to like a month.
Okay.
I don't know. I feel like it's kind of hard to judge by like length of time. I do tend to be a pretty aggressive researcher when it comes to things.
Me too. A month.
I think I caught up on your podcast in less than a week.
And I'm the same way.
If I'm into something.
that amazes me every time I hear it. We've had people message us, hey, you got into you last week and I'm almost caught up. I'm like, where are you finding enough time to listen to us?
Right.
That's the joy of a podcast. You put your headphones on, you go take care of other stuff, and you're just like downloading the whole time.
No, I love, I have, so what's funny is that prior to me and Nathan starting this podcast, I didn't listen to podcasts. Now it's all I do. And so, I don't know.
I was kind of your barometer on a few things on what we should be doing just because of how much I was consuming, especially on the YouTube end of it.
I was not. I reached out to Nathan. I was like, hey, want to do a podcast? And I was like, yeah, I've maybe listened to like 2 total episodes of anything ever prior to that.
I think I've turned on JRE once or twice.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, and just to kind of relate, like, I know some people might hear like, oh, she only did research for a month. I know what you're talking about. Like, I can relate to that so much because when I have an interest on something, I become obsessive over it. I was like that as a kid. When I wanted a new snake, I was relentless towards my parents. And it's the same way as an adult. When I need to learn something, I jump in. And so, a month is probably even more that it takes for me to kind of be familiar with something in these days, because I'm, I almost seems like it's like a little manic phase where I just kind of like,
the hyperfixation is real. But also, to be fair, I mean, that was more specifically just for a retic. I mean, I admittedly had not had my other snake for a super duper long time, but I already had a snake. I'd been researching for several months before that on, general snake care. So, I mean, I knew the basics of what I needed to do. It was more those nuances of, okay, how is this species different? Like, what is this feeding response they keep talking about? Like, are they legal where I am? Looking into things like that. So
that's a pretty important thing to brush over before you.
It is important to know.
I feel like it goes over people's head, though.
It can't when you get into large constrictors.
Yeah.
Well, and also, like, I mean, I think just animals in general, because I'm also a pit bull owner, so I feel like I'm very cognizant of like where this dog can be, where she can't be. Even if we're like road tripping, I think it's important to kind of map that out and be aware. So that was very front of mind for me.
Which, by the way, is frustrating as hell, right?
Oh, it's ridiculous, and it's not helpful.
It pisses me off.
Also, I mean, identification is a whole issue, and
right.
I won't get on my soapbox about that, but yeah, definitely front of mind when getting another animal that is more regulated than a lot of other pets.
Right. Nathan, I got one more question for her before I allow her to before this reverse interview starts. But if you have any questions for her, feel free to as well before we do this. But I guess my question for you as well is, and this is kind of like a genuine curiosity, but also selfishness for TRL, because we're always looking for episodes to create, to educate and share our experience. But based on your research with reticulated pythons, what was an abundance of information that you found, and like what were some things that like you really struggled to find? And I don't know, maybe even might be asking us some questions, but like how was gathering information for retics?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was kind of trying to find some stuff before you start with all this. I'm looking at my very large Google document that I created during my research process.
Are you type A personality? Yeah. Okay.
I love gathering information into documents. Just makes my brain happy. I'm trying to think what was like I feel like a lot of like the basic information around like general temperature ranges, humidity, enclosure size, like that all seemed pretty straightforward. I feel like the biggest thing that I learned listening to you guys talk was more how to actually think through like the purchasing process and questions to ask a breeder, because that was probably the first time that I had heard a lot of those recommendations. And I feel like in one of the earlier episodes, you had a very good conversation about just kind of being realistic with like size expectations and being cognizant of how old the parents were in addition to how large they were. Because I see that a lot, because I'm also one of those people. I know there's some other people on Discord who do this, so I don't feel as ridiculous, but like I love to just scroll Morph Market just to look at more snakes.
Oh, I love window shopping.
But like you'll often just be like, oh, the dad was only like 5 feet and the mom was, 7 feet. Like these babies are going to be tiny, and you never see anything around like the age of the snakes or just other useful background information.
A picture of just the owner holding the adult animal.
Oh, you never get to see that. If you get to, I mean, I'm assuming they would be hopefully forthcoming with that if you were to inquire about them. But admittedly, even during my buying process, I had to be pretty specific about like, no, I need you to tell me like exactly how old the parents were. you know,
right. Good. And I mean, good for you.
And to like keep asking that. I'm going to keep asking for every pairing you bring up. So just
right.
have that ready.
Like, here are my 5 questions. Every pairing you recommend or every baby you recommend, just send the information over. But yeah, I think that I'm going to be honest. I think, like, you know, in my top 5 favorite episodes that we've done, 2 of them are Is a Retic Right for You and How to Purchase a Super Dwarf Reticulated Python. You know, because I feel like we, you know, in a long form content podcast, you know, and you talk for an hour and a half or 2 hours, you cover a lot. And you know, I've even gone back and listened to those episodes and I'm like, oh, we went there. So yeah, I go back and you know, I've listened to those episodes because I don't know.
I need to start doing that.
I like the cringy aspect of going back and hearing our early episodes and how bad we were. So like, and that's why I appreciate those episodes more, because they were good episodes really early on. And so,
another one actually that I'm thinking of, that I actually listened to on the way to go. And I promise this is not just trying to be like, oh my God, your guys' podcast is so great. But like, in all seriousness, there was a lot of information that I was not seeing other places, was what to do when you first get your Retic. Like literally, like I'm picking it up from the hub. What should I do?
Box. Like, yeah,
which was actually very helpful because admittedly, my guy was shipped to me on a day where like it probably did get a little bit too cold overnight, and he was fine, but just kind of having the awareness of like he's probably gonna need a little more time to warm up. Like, make sure to use the temp gun to kind of see where he's at. Make sure he's moving around okay. Right. So like that was very helpful because I'm not really sure that definitely would not have occurred to me if I had not heard that suggestion.
I'm happy that you gained something out of that episode, because I remember recording that one specifically, and Nathan and I decided to record that episode an hour before. Like, there was zero organization, zero planning, zero. Like, I remember going into that and finishing that recording, and Nathan, you and I talked and was like, I feel like we missed a lot of shit, or like we didn't like.
Yes, I do remember that.
It was one of those where I was like, well, let's put it out and hopefully people get something out of it. So that's good. Yeah. You know, I want to, you know, anyways, no, I'm done talking about the podcast, but Nathan, you have any questions before we turn it to Katherine to start our reverse interview?
No, I'm ready to sit back, relax, and have them thrown at us.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right. Well, just immediately jumping in, what mistakes do you normally see people making as like new Retic keepers? Because I feel like going into this, I heard a lot of warnings about like, you know what you're getting into. People make a lot of mistakes, but it was always kind of vague what those mistakes were. So what issues do you guys normally see coming up with people who are like brand new to Retics?
I think I'm going to stick true to what I've said historically, and that's just impulse buying.
Yes, I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Just impulse buying, because whether it's a Retic on a table at a show and it's pretty and it's in your price range, or you know, you're window shopping on Morph Market, and you really need to take a lot of special consideration before bringing any Retic into your home. Space, time, energy, the money it's going to cost to feed this thing eventually. And yeah, I just think impulse buying is probably the biggest thing that I still see.
Can we pause for a moment and give Katherine a round of applause for interacting with a very affordable Retic with Heartland Reptiles and loving the experience and not going home with that animal? Can we just say, like, awesome job. I
literally messaged Jordan not too long ago, and I was like, I just want to get the record straight. Like, I love your snakes. These are gorgeous animals. I got to go. One thing I didn't mention as part of my research process is I did actually get to go visit his collection and see some of his like full-grown adult snakes, which, like, let me tell you, I was definitely trying to figure out how to fit that like 9-foot snake in my pocket and sneak it out with no one noticing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, gorgeous snakes. But he's also very straightforward, which I appreciate about You know,
Oh,
he's like,
absolutely.
I am not trying to breed super tiny retics,
Mhm.
which was what I was looking for, mostly as a first snake, but also because there are size limitations in my area. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh, yeah.
nothing but love for those snakes, but you know,
Right. No, I
she wasn't the
totally.
right fit for me.
Yeah, I'm
Before
the
I
same way.
before I answer that question, do you mind, just for the record for everyone listening, how long have you been keeping your single super dwarf animal now?
So I got him just a little bit over a month ago.
Okay, cool.
So he is still settling in.
So
But honestly has been very easy so far. I've been very pleasantly surprised.
brand
But
new.
mm-hmm.
Careful.
Yeah.
We might have you come on every 4 or 5 months to follow the journey. So
Oh no.
I guess the biggest mistake that I see people make, I think impulse buying is like the most consequential mistake, and I would agree
Yeah.
with Nathan. But a couple other things that I see people doing is number one is keeping them too hot. I see a lot of people that, if you go online right now, you can Google like temperature to keep reticulated python, and I guarantee you're going to see 90 to 92 degree hotspot. And that's still a very outdated aspect. Now, don't get me wrong. You can keep a 92 hotspot if your enclosure is huge and you have a great gradient all over the place. I guarantee you'll see that retic sitting at 92 when it's digesting. But yeah, that's like the number one mistake. And I get people who buy animals from other people, and they'll message me and be like, hey, I watch your episode on pushing and everything, and thank you, because I talked to people and I researched, and I was keeping my hotspot way too hot. Easiest way to ruin your retic's face or to adversely cause long-term negative health impacts is to overheat your retic. They're from the Indonesian jungle. They're not from a very hot climate. It's just very humid with moderate heat. So
Well, and one thing we didn't add into that episode was airflow. Airflow can always help that too.
Yeah, exactly. So overheating your retic is the number one thing that I see. And the number two thing that I see is I had it earlier and it left, but and it was a important one. Oh man.
Overheating.
Yeah, overheating and
Anything with food. I don't
no,
know.
it was it was okay. So not and this goes back to that episode of how to buy a super dwarf, but a lot of people now are buying, the super dwarf stuff. And, these are new keepers that are coming in, and a lot of people are, I guess that's what it was. Okay. Is prioritizing price tag over, over accurate, good, solid background and information on your animal. And they, they'll reach out to someone and say, hey, how much are your super dwarfs? And you'll tell them 1,200, 1,500, and then they send you a picture 3 weeks later of their new 97.85% super dwarf that costs them $400. And it's like, and again, exaggeration on the percentage to show that it's not accurate.
That's very exaggerated.
Yeah, no, just to show that it's not an accurate percentage. No one's made that percent, but
Eric's working on it.
Yeah, I think it's prioritizing like the quick, cheap option instead of actually talking to someone who can provide you all the information that you're looking for. Yeah. Because that's going to end up leading someone disappointed with the size of their animal and opens up the opportunity for, neglecting a larger animal or rehoming.
I think it just kind of rounds back to what Catherine brought up earlier with just like asking those more probing questions about the parents and, the background of the snakes.
Yeah. New buyers, new retic people, be annoying. Don't be afraid to be annoying. Be annoying. Ask all the questions in the world.
Okay. That sounds like a lot of the problems happen before the retic even gets to your home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any problems with the retics.
No. Sometimes.
Well, since we were talking about research, hopefully we're all learning as we go as well. So I was curious with you two, kind of what your go-tos are as far as like staying up to date with new information or just making sure you're getting exposed to new ideas with keeping.
It's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I'm always looking at people who are making innovations in other parts of the industry, like new
Yes.
ways we can house our animals, new ways we can, provide UV spectrum lighting. I'm looking at, just like people like Spencer and wow, why am I spacing his name? Scott
Yes.
Sievers.
Yeah.
Yeah, just I think most of what keeps me current on them is just trying to find new ways to, enrich my animals' lives, or try to update the way I'm keeping.
Yeah. I think for me, so when it comes to basic husbandry, right, and just making sure that I can keep my retics healthy, I think that I've been able to do that long enough now that that's no longer something that I'm really looking at in terms of finding new information. I will like to add that if you are new and you are looking to find information, my biggest advice, and this is why I've told people in the past, like if you're not on Facebook, despite how toxic and stupid Facebook can be, but if you're not on Facebook, you are really missing a gold mine of information. If you're on Facebook and you join the Retic Nation, that group has been open for over 13 years. You can type in any question that you have, and there's going to be 100 posts on there with dozens, if not, probably a total of over 100 to 200 different answers and feedback. And so that was my wealth of knowledge and how I really learned about localities, how I learned about husbandry, how I learned about incubation and breeding.
Morphs, yeah, like just general
Morphs,
information,
right.
yeah.
But where I'm looking to now is very like for more information is twofold. Number one, my animals teach me the most. If observing and spending time in the room that your animals are in is huge. And number two is I'm looking at the new people coming in, and this overlaps with Nathan's answer. The new people coming in generally are keeping other reptile species, and they're keeping them in a phenomenal way.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the new people coming in, including yourself, Catherine, you have an amazing setup for
Thank you.
For a tiny retic. And that is what I am learning from. I do have a lot of animals, and my progress is not nearly as fast as I would like to, but I know where I am going towards, and it's those large naturalistic enclosures that people like you and the new keepers are coming in and showing us up. And it's not even about like the whole ethics side of it, because I think that there needs to be a balance with large scale breeders and what they can provide and breeders in general versus a pet keeper. However, I just have learned to love to enjoy, like my dopamine just fires off when I see a retic in a large naturalistic enclosure. And so if my dopamine is firing off when I'm just watching a video of it, I want to replicate it at home.
And it is very fun. And that's definitely been something that I've been enjoying, is just, he's out so much,
Right.
Which, no offense to my ball python hanging out over here, but sometimes you don't see him for quite a while, and it's so fun. I'll just be walking in and out of the room and he just kind of cruises down and he'll just take a little look at me,
Right.
So it's nice to get to see him enjoying that big of a space, because admittedly, when he did come in a box like this big, I was like, I have made a terrible mistake. Like, I'm going to put this steak in here and I'm never going to see him again. He's going to be curled up somewhere and I'll have no idea where he is. And he always lets me know exactly where he is.
But it's not too bad.
Man, he is out all the time. It's crazy.
Do you have a reptile social media or something that like we can go on and see if we can see a picture of the setup online, or do you not have that up?
I don't. I'd be happy to share some photos.
Share some photos.
Yeah, I'm kind of like a little ghost on social media right now. I just got tired.
Good for you.
That's not where my energy needs to go right now. So.
Good for you. Send some pictures over my way so I can edit them in here.
Yeah, I'd love to.
We also want to thank VivTech Products for being an affiliate sponsor of the Retic Lounge.
Stop by VivTech Products for the best UV spectrum lighting on the market that will enhance and improve your snake's overall well-being and health. Visit vivtechproducts.com and use the code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off. Again, visit vivtechproducts.com and use our affiliate code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off. Looking for the perfect accessories for your hatchlings or juvenile retics? Look no further than Heli Guy Serpents. Our sponsor, Chris Sexton, is coming in hot with an amazing 3D printer, creating top-notch perches and other caging accessories for your beloved pets. Enrich your Retics environment with their high-quality products. Use our promo code TRL10 for a 10% discount on your purchase. Visit them today at heliguyserpents.com and start giving your pets the best. Heli Guy Serpents, the premier source for 3D printed caging accessories. Again, that's www.heliguyserpents.com and use our promo code TRL10 for 10% off all of your 3D printed accessories today.
Okay. So, speaking of the differences between the ball python and the retic, I would love to kind of hear you guys describe the difference between like food mode and thinking mode for retics as far as like what that body language looks like. Because that was something as a new keeper, I was like, how subtle is this going to be? Like, am I going to be able to like accurately identify this and not get like a food response bite? Which I will say it was probably not as subtle as I thought it was going to be. But as the experts, I would love to hear you guys kind of describe like specifically what that looks like.
I think when it's a food response when you jump back, from their reaction. That's when you know it's a food response, is when you look at the animal and you feel very nervous and scared and you're like, I'm going to take a few steps back. No, but jokes aside, I'm paying attention to one, their pupils.
That's the first thing I look at.
Yeah,
the pupils are crazy.
No, they're insane. If you're
that blew my mind the first time I saw it. I was like, "Whoa, what is happening?"
Yeah, when your retic's eyes are black, you know that they are just on full alert.
Step back.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Step back or put a hook in between you two and tap it. I think another thing for me is I can go off like the general stuff. You look at tongue flicking and you look at curiosity, like movements, right? Like, so to me, food mode looks like pupils dilated and they are either actively coming at you quickly or they are stuck frozen and you see them slowly moving that neck back, right?
Yep.
That's food mode.
Or even just standing still, but you'll still just see them focused with those pupils.
Yeah. They're not moving. And that's kind of goes back to their ambush predator, ways is, they see the movement, the cage is open.
They won't even flick their tongue.
Dude, that's the weird part.
They'll just sit still. They won't flick their tongue until they see what they're trying to focus on. Then they'll start the quick, very quick tongue flicks and then start approaching.
Yeah. I like to see longer tongue flicks. I like to see slower, more smooth, like slithering, right? Like instead of like just the like little bits that they're kind of just like a little bit creeping up. I want to see them just like, they look, I guess it's hard for me to, I'm really good with observing body language. It's something I got to do for my profession. So looking at body language. I hate to
anthropomorphize them, but especially when they get bigger, they look like when they're thinking, they just look sweet.
They got but a then sweet
when
face.
They're in food mode, they look scary.
Yeah, no, you know.
Yeah, it's like Jekyll and Hyde.
Right, exactly. And I would also say that like in addition to that like sweet and scary side of it is I don't know. I just I have not been bit a lot for how many snakes that I have, and I always just like it's my gut, right? There are people who don't care to get bit. I don't like to get bit, right? And so I think
that's why I like these animals. It's a big python. It still acts like a big snake, but it projects like their emotions so well that like as long as you're smart about every interaction you have with them, you're kind of they're telling you almost what their mood is, you know. They're very projective.
Yeah, and one last thing that I will add is I have found that when you start doing this with younger retics, it carries over very well as they start aging. I definitely, if anybody is getting a adult and you know, and you haven't raised the animal, I would not recommend doing this. But oftentimes, like, I'll open up the enclosure and I see that food mode there, and rather than breaking it with the hook, I will literally just stand there. And that's the best opportunity to learn from your animal, to see that tension, to see the pupils dilated. And then after realizing, like, wait, it hasn't been 10 seconds and a rat isn't in my face, they start thinking and the tongue start to flick a little bit more. And you see their body posture and their muscles kind of relax a little bit.
Yep, especially as some of my snakes were growing up and they would be like striking at the glass a couple days after feeding.
Dude.
That was my favorite thing, is I'd just drop it down. I know they're in food mode, and I'd just stand there and wait for them. It's like a kid throwing a fit. It's like, all right, throw your fit, but it's going to be over in a minute.
Yeah. Do you mind me asking you, what have you observed so far in a month and a half?
Yeah, I was going to say it's been nice to have him, because he's very small. I mean, he's maybe 3 feet and just, you know, he's like a pipe cleaner. So, you know, oh my God, he's adorable.
They're so ugly with those big googly eyes. It's like cute ugly.
I promise they grow into them. They said that about my ears, and it was true. And it's the same with those eyes.
They said that about my teeth. My nickname was Chicklet.
I was a little shocked, to be honest, when I first opened the box and he was looking dead at me, and I'm like, dude, you look weird. Like, why does he look so funky? But I think he is already growing into a very handsome little man, or I'm just used to it at this point. But it has been interesting to see. Obviously, the pupils were a big one. Like, the first time he looked at me, I'm like, you are like off on a different. Right. Yeah, I'm like, you have like cracked out eyes. You are not thinking about anything productive or good right now. But I have just been able to kind of sit back and watch him more. So I feel like the pupils are the biggest thing I look for. The coming directly towards me is definitely something that I'm grateful he's the size he is. There was one day where, so he has a ledge on the back of his enclosure, and that's kind of where he likes to chill out like 90% of the day until it starts getting dark. And he has a little hide, and he just kind of pokes his little head out and just looks around. And I was like, oh, he's all the way up there. I'm just going to reach in and change his big water bowl here at the bottom. And he just came cruising right out. And I looked away for 1 second. I looked back up, and he was just like, hey.
Yep.
And I was like, okay.
Note to self. Know what's going on. That's
don't look away from him when you're in the enclosure.
I love how you said like his thinking was like, hey, like it's because they are very much in that food mode. They're in your grill, like they are in your bubble, and it's like, please back up.
It's very just like, I was over there and now I am real close. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna make a note not to do that anymore. But his actual responses to eating, like he's been eating very well, but it hasn't been these like, you know, huge dramatic strikes that you see on like YouTube and stuff, or like coming over the tongs and like all this crazy stuff. And so, you know, I'm used to my ball python dropping his food and not being able to find the head for like 30 minutes. So I normally just sit there, and what else is fun to watch him eat, you know? So I like to sit there and make sure like everything goes down okay, we don't have any problems. And so I'm sitting there watching him eat, and he swallows a mouse, and then he just kind of looks at me, and he suddenly starts like breathing really heavily. And I'm like, oh, did he like maybe forget I was here? And now he's like a little stressed because like he was kind of close to me, and I'm just watching him, and, you know, just, again, glad he was small. I'm like, oh, what's wrong, buddy? And all of a sudden he just like lunges out towards the front of the glass. And I was like, yep, you know, and so again, so he was so small, I kind of took the hook and I was like, you're back in there, and just kind of put him away for the night. But I was like, again, good to note, because I've noticed that pattern in feeding since then, that like, even if the glass is closed or anything, as soon as he's done swallowing, his head just pops right back up. He figures out where I am, and I'm like, nope,
Oh yeah, I have a
we're
couple
done for
shy
now.
eaters, and like if you're in the
He's not
room,
shy.
well, if you're in the room and you make movement, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna get another item of food, and this one is null and void in my
Mm.
enclosure now.
Yeah, no, seriously. I'm multi. You brought up your enclosure again, and so I do remember you sharing your enclosure on Patreon. So I'm like digging through Patreon right now because I'm gonna send it to Nathan. I want him to bring it up. I don't trust myself with remembering to add the pictures in post production, but yeah,
You
I
get
think
them to me.
yeah, I think that yeah, I really think that, I don't know. I mean, we as humans have survived and, have evolved over, thousands and thousands of years. And that's because our body and brain understand danger and fight, flight, or freeze. And,
Mhm.
I think that like as much as a lot of us are a little over controlled in areas or like type A personalities, we want a written understanding and step by step of what these different responses look like. But if you're not under the influence of an illicit substance and you open up your Retics enclosure, it's very easy to tell if it's in food mode because you're going to feel
Mhm.
uneasy.
Yeah, I think the only time I was happy to see that when he was really looking for food, I'm like, okay, this is very clear to me. I think the only place where it's still a little blurry for me is when he's just really interested in something. And I was actually watching it was a green room python video where he was kind of talking about like growing up with the reticulated pythons that he has, which was kind of fun. But how one will just be like genuinely interested and will kind of just like follow him around if he's like doing work in the enclosure and stuff like that. Um, and he was very confident it was not a food mode thing. I feel like, like we're still getting to know each other a little bit. So I'm maybe not going to let you get quite as close to me when you look like that interested
All right.
until I have like a better grasp on like what you're actually doing. But that's
Right.
that's the only time I'm like a little uncertain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the pupils and the tongue flicks for me, and
Mhm.
I mean their movement too. I mean if they're moving towards me, that's fine if I'm in their enclosure. But if they're like really kind of racing towards me or like jerking, making weird sporadic movements, that's when I start more thinking that it's food mode. You know,
Yeah.
they'll be really confident and calm when they're just interested in coming out to you.
As we're talking about this, I'm thinking of like 100 different, Nathan, maybe we should do an episode food mode versus thinking mode, or maybe we should just talk about like the
Yeah.
three modes in more detail. I think that'd be helpful. That sounds like
Yeah.
because I could talk about this stuff for days because not only is it, good and, we can share experiences, but I got plenty of stories too, fun stories.
Yeah, I
So that
know.
it could make for a fun episode.
We need to have a little like story time episode where we just get to hear
Oh, that's
hear fun
nice.
stories. But in all
Uh,
seriousness, I think it would be helpful because one of the things that I just kept coming across when I was researching is everyone's like food response bites. But then there was very little information about like, okay, how do I not get that? Like even with
yeah, right.
even with like hook training, very vague. Like just
So,
I wanted a lot more detail about like there's like, oh,
yeah.
just have the hook. And I'm like, and
Just
do
punch it
So,
in
like
the
wave it at
face.
them? Like what are we doing with this thing?
yeah, you need to
That's such a good
understand
point.
not to just like tap them on the top of the head. Anything that is hunting a snake is going to be coming from above them. So, I try to come from the front or underneath,
Mhm.
rub their side, that kind of training with the hook.
Which I also found my guy got pretty spooked if I tried to touch him underneath at all, even if he was like off of a ledge or anything. So, I've learned that like petting him on the side works really well, but
I
there was not a lot of information about like troubleshooting around like how do I first introduce like a hook to a snake that has not experienced that
Right.
sort of
Right.
I'm
thing.
also very like overly handsy with my young snakes too, like to try to get them out of that.
Mhm.
because any snake's going to be a little bit head shy at first, generally.
Yeah.
And so, especially if you need to do any like examinations, open up their mouth, for whatever reason, getting an impacted tooth out or having to give oral and medication. Just want it to be an easy process and something that animal's not going to stress out over
Right.
if I have to do it in their future.
Right. Yeah.
That would be a good episode as well. And also brings me to my next question about socializing new snakes. I'm sure this varies wildly depending on like, how old the snake is, just their temperament, but just like in general, like in my situation, okay, you have a brand new snake. Like how often are you getting them out to handle them? Are you doing more like passive interactions with them? What does that like typically look like for you guys?
They're not a dog, so they don't need interactions with other snakes is the first thing I would tell a new
shoot.
keeper who just got their first few retics. Like let's
I will
not
say,
test those boundaries.
not to just interrupt, but the number of times I have been asked by people in my life if my two snakes are going to be living together or if they're going to be playing together.
Gosh.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, which I try to answer that very politely because you don't want to be like that dick that's like, no, snakes don't do that. But I'm just like, it's hard to explain to people like, they don't have like their brains aren't like ours. They don't like need social interaction. So, and they're like, well, will they see each other through the glass? And I'm like, I don't know what they're gonna see. Okay, like they're probably peering around with their eyes at all sorts of things. But I'm like, ideally, no.
Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're not playing with other snakes. We got that covered.
Nathan, you want to add more to that?
Go for it. I'll add in.
I was going to say that, so I'm going to answer this question based off of like, I'm going to take myself back to when I had only a few retics and they were like pets at the time. Because when I get a new snake in right now, I got, a garage full of snakes. Speaking of garage full of snakes, just to kind of comment on your story, I had a coworker ask me after learning that I keep them in the garage. She's like, oh, are they all just in the garage free roaming? And I'm like,
Yep, I just have a central tree in there, a waterfall running.
Yeah, they're just it's Indonesia. So I'm gonna be honest. Like I did this is a deep question for me because I have a lot of thoughts and different experiences that I've had. But when I first got my retics, I let it settle for, I don't know, 5-7 days. I fed it a meal, and after I saw it poop, it's first time with me, and I think it was actually after a shed. After that, I didn't shy away. I was so excited. It was my first snake that I went all of college and graduate school and a year and a half into marriage. So I went like my longest time ever without a snake. It was like 7-8 years without one, and then I got one, and it was one of my dream snakes. Superdorf locality retic. And I'm going to be honest. I wasn't considering what the snake wanted. I was just so happy to have it that I was holding it. But let me also add that by doing that, I have never once been bit. I still have that snake here in my garage. Never once been bit by her. She has never been defensive towards me. She does let me know now that she's much older. She lets me know she doesn't want to be handled because she runs away from me. Normally if she runs away from me, even if I have to clean her enclosure, she'll go up on her shelf and I could just clean with her in there. But I think that when it comes to handling your retic, if you have time to, the only thing that I think really matters is just knowing and looking at what stress looks like in your animals.
Mm-hmm.
But now I do a little bit of choice-based type of handling, and I'm target training some of my retics, and I definitely, I have Pimboros, I have Sri Lankans in my garage now, and when they're huffing, puffing, and pissed off, and they look, they're making themselves look big, like I'm not going to force an interaction. So don't ever force yourself on your animals. But, and here's an important but, or I should say, and I think a lot of people learn about choice-based handling and they take it to Lori and what she does in her research is phenomenal. And Lori is also a behavioralist, and she's doing these micro experiments in her head. So when she is doing these things in a very controlled way to gain an understanding of snakes' behaviors, I think that that's important for her. And she's relaying that message of what is choice-based handling based off of what she is sharing about behavioralism. However, we've had some people on our Patreon that are like, my snake never wants to come out. I've had it for 6, 8, 12 months. My snake doesn't want to come out. And, I think that like your drive to want to make sure that this is fully consenting for your snake is beautiful. And I also think that like, if you want to hold your snake, there are going to be days where you need to take your damn snake out.
Yeah. There's going to be the day where the enclosure is full of pee and, the snake might buck you and huff and puff, but you still have to pull it out and shut down that food response.
Yeah.
And I think establishing a routine and really just allowing that animal to kind of, it's weird. These animals kind of know who you are. At least I get that sense.
No, I do too. Yeah,
And
I'll have family members over the garage or friends and everything. And every single time that, I give them to them, the snake is always coming back towards me. Always. I'm not even exaggerating when I say always. It's always gravitating back towards my way.
yeah, so I mean, establish a good routine, establish trust with the animal, I think is huge. So whatever you choose to do, whether that be choice-based handling and you want to just, use a target and, free handle when you want to pick them up out of the enclosure, that's fine. But just establish a solid routine. I think they thrive with that.
Yeah. I don't think there's, with retics specifically, because retics are a lot more of a social, interactive animal than a lot of others. There are animals that don't want to be bothered. Retics, once they start to get the idea of what getting out of their enclosure looks like, they love it. They love it so much that they will push and destroy their face to get out of their enclosure for enrichment. They need to be stimulated, and being handled and having a space outside of this box we put them in is important for them.
Absolutely.
And so I don't think there's a limit to how often you can hold it as long as the interactions are positive. And again, like,
Look at what the curly-haired keeper does.
oh yeah. Abby does great stuff.
Yeah, Abby has so many videos just showing these animals like just dying to get out of their enclosures, and that's the perfect time to interact with them.
Exactly. Yeah. So like if you look into Lori's stuff and you're like, I'm going to do choice-based handling because I want this to be a fully trusting, consenting relationship between the two, it's like, go for it. And if you notice that your snake is not coming out and you've had your snake for 8 months, I want you to also understand that you can build a trusting relationship by taking it out, having short sessions, putting it back in, and the snake is eventually going to learn, hey, like, I have been handled by this person. Again, they're not really thinking this, but the relationship between, I have been handled by this person and I'm still alive. They've never hurt me. I'm good. And eventually they drop down that guard and they're going to be a social retic. So, just don't hold it an hour after you feed it. Give it a couple days, right? But outside of that, as long as your snake isn't squirming like crazy or biting you or doing, like, just hold it.
Yeah. I was kind of curious too, because I definitely, watched quite a few videos about choice-based handling. I was pretty dead set on doing that exclusively with my ball python when I first got him. I'm always kind of curious, and I'm sure someone has already answered this question, but if that maybe works differently either with older animals or animals that have kind of smaller enclosures who maybe have more motivation to come out. Because sometimes I also forget, like, both of my snakes are under a year old. Like, they're babies.
Wait, you got two snakes within a year?
Lucas, I don't think that's something that you need to be saying.
No, I'm just saying, like you're going like this is a path that I can relate. I'm just saying, like come talk to me if you ever find yourself struggling to not get another animal. Okay.
I will let you know. I will say just the size of enclosures I like having, and then the amount of space that is dedicated as like my rooms in the
Yeah, you
house is
can't get too much.
no, I really can't. Also, honestly, this retake is kind of like making other snakes not seem as fun at this point. Like I'm seeing some other snakes and I'm like, yeah, but they're not gonna like climb around and do cool stuff and look at me with their little crazy eyes. Like,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm enjoying what I have right now. But awesome. You handle a retic and that's that. So
Game over.
um but anyway, the point is they're both very young animals. So I almost feel like that just handling them, you know, more frequently, short periods of time seems to go really well. Plus, honestly, again, just like I feel like I've been like name dropping Jordan over and over, but I don't know a lot of people with snakes. But after seeing, his babies and just seeing, how he interacts with them and just how calm and relaxed they were, I was like, okay, there's something to this. Like all it is, he just gets them out regularly, handles them, and they were just so calm, no signs of stress whatsoever. And I'm like, well, that's what I want. Like I want a snake that when I get him out, he's not going to be concerned about it. So after seeing that, I definitely had less reservations about just tap training him, getting him out for a little bit.
Be handsy.
Be handsy, and the snake's eventually going to realize like these hands weren't meant to hurt it.
Yep. Okay. So not something that I have to be super concerned about at the moment, since he is just a little string bean. But just kind of general safety precautions people should keep in mind when getting larger constrictors that can get, 8, 9, 10 plus feet. And I know that's something you guys have talked about a little bit, but I feel like for a new keeper, it's not a bad thing to have front of mind or at least be aware of.
The most important thing that you want to do is hold it alone and around your neck.
Okay.
No, joking.
Check.
Joking. Nathan, I'll let you start this one off.
Yeah, I was just that. I mean, not far off. They're not a scarf. You're not Britney Spears. Unless you're modeling for Pit Viper, then you can be Britney Spears for a minute.
Right.
Let's see.
I'm gonna flash that photo of you in the episode.
Have some parameters set, just some basic safety parameters set. If you have someone else you can rely on, then make sure they're around when you're holding the larger animals. Anything over 8-9 foot, it's good to have someone around. After that, then just the other safety parameters is just what are you going to do if you do get bit, you're not able to call for help and it's around your neck, then I don't
know why I'm laughing. Sorry.
Have some Listerine around. You can always do the bite
Find
on
that
the tail trick.
Find that tail.
Yep. So just have some outs and just know what your outs are in case you end up in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to echo that, and I'm going to echo it differently with just my personal, like what I do and my experience. It's funny because my wife, like, she supports me, but she also tolerates the animals. And the reason why she tolerates them is not because she doesn't like them. It's because I don't shut up about them. So she tolerates them. But I got I was dumb. I kept retics for like a year and a half, and I got wild caught retics. And then also like about a year after that, I bought a 14-foot Solaire, right? So like 2.5 years into keeping them, and largest steak I've ever kept was 8.5, 9 feet. And now I have a 14-foot retic. And I didn't do the whole like mentor thing and like have, I didn't go and interact with retics. So I would tell my wife, and at first she thought I was joking. I was like, I'm not joking. But I was like, hey, I'm going to be upstairs. And if you hear me scream pineapple, I need you to run upstairs and you're going to, and that's why she probably thought it was a joke, but I had to tell her like, no, seriously.
She's like, why are you bringing our safe word into this?
Exactly. No, that's oranges. So I had to educate and explain her, right? So like you can do this even with someone who doesn't work with snakes, as long as there's another person in the house. You know, you don't have to use a word. I'm sure that if they hear, "Ah," right, they're gonna be like, oh shit, let me go upstairs. So I told her about the Listerine, the spray bottle sprayed in the mouth if it's wrapped me. Yeah. And I told her about, you know, the whole biting the tail. And I even broke down like what her role would be, right? Like I was like, I'll control the front end. I just need you to help unwrap the tail if that were to ever happen. Because when I got my 14-foot Solaire at first, she was, and let's just say it took about like 4 to 6 months for us to trust each other. And so, you know, but there's even times where like, if you have a larger retic and you don't have anyone around, I want to just share this, that even if their cage is disgusting, if you simply don't feel safe getting it out of the enclosure to clean it for whatever reason, don't do it. Wait. Like I always will try. I'll open it up. And if she just is not having it, period, and I'm alone, I'll try again in 3-4 hours when someone's at home. Just again, it's listening to our natural fight, flight, or it's listening to our gut. Like again, we're humans. We've survived for this long. Like if just listen to your intuition and you'll be okay. But yeah, don't put the snake around your neck if it's a 9-10 foot animal, because even if it's the most docile snake ever, man, it takes one thing to startle it and to squeeze your neck like they're capable of, and you'll be on the floor in 5 seconds. Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay.
Nathan, you're on mute. I saw your mouth move.
No, I did not talk. I was nodding along with you. I think I laughed, but
okay, fine.
You know,
I'm gonna take a sharp turn from your snake trying to suffocate you to questions about feeder sizes. So having it eat something that's not you. I know this is something that you guys talked about quite a bit in another episode, and it seems like for a lot of reptiles, feeding is a little bit more of an art than a science sometimes. You know, I feel like I've always been told kind of, you know, find a feeder that's like roughly the same size around as the snake is kind of like a starting point, or like for ball pythons, they recommend like weighing them, you know, things like that. But, you know,
I love seeing
I love Lucas already seems exasperated.
No, you said something that kind of just like made me laugh. I get questions of retic keepers that have been keeping for like a year or two, and they came from ball pythons or corn snakes, and they're like, you know, what percentage of body weight do you know, what weight do you feed your retics? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, you don't weigh your feeders. And I'm like, these are retics. Eventually they're going to be like, they're going to be eating bigger prey. Like it's not like they're only going to get up to a medium rat and you can, you know, so yeah, I definitely don't think it's even close to being the scientific side. I guess it could be the art side, but Nathan, what are your thoughts before I continue?
I was going to say, sometimes I feel like it's still an art.
Yeah.
I have a chicken in my freezer right now that I will not feed because
don't do it.
I'm pretty sure it can't, my biggest snake can't take it.
Don't do it.
And same with rabbits. So I mean, I've been advised with rabbits that like the head is really the biggest part of the body, and if the head's not, you know, more than 1.5 times the size of the body, then you should be okay.
Yeah. You know, there's
it's definitely, I think you're dead on the money. Sometimes it's a little bit more of an art than a science.
Right. And sometimes it's a science in the way that you just have to experiment and let's see if it can swallow it. You know, because here's one thing that I will say.
But what do you do if he can't swallow it?
No, so I'll share another experience with the same Solaire.
It gives me anxiety.
And the reason why I was telling Nathan don't do it with the chicken is because I underestimated just how So a chicken's head is like, doesn't matter how big the chicken is, it's tiny, right?
Mhm.
So the very next part that it has to go to, is the chest cavity, which is the largest part.
Mhm.
And so there was a time where I had like I have already fed this 14-foot Solayer a 6-pound rabbit, a 5-pound pig. So I decided to feed it a 5-pound chicken, right? So I'm thinking 5-pound chicken, 6-pound rabbit, no big deal. Very big deal. That chest cavity was way too big. I had a camera on it. 7 hours of this snake trying to swallow it, and to the point where I was scared because she was trying so hard. I could see her shaking and so it couldn't swallow it. And she eventually got tired, and she actually knows way longer than that. I actually had to wake up the next morning to remove it. And here's how I removed it is after I saw that she didn't do it, I offered her just like a jumbo rat, something tiny for a 14-foot retic, because she was exhausted. I didn't want her to have a meal that was going to be any form of strenuous. And so I gave her the rat. She bit it, lightly coiled it. I removed the big item out of the enclosure safely, right? Here's one thing that I've observed. If your retic can swallow it and it's in its belly, your retic's going to be fine. And if your retic can't swallow it, it can't swallow it. Eventually it will stop. And you're going to be really scared when you are seeing your snake for 12 hours try to swallow something and you think its mouth is going to split, but it won't, because they're smarter than I think we give them credit to. And so unless it's eating something that has something sharp, right? That's a different story. But so yeah, for me, when it comes to feeding and how big, sometimes it is scientific in like the experimental aspect of like, let me see if you can try this and see if you can finish it, because I don't feed meals the same. Like, I'm not someone who's like, oh, my 2-year-old Calatoa is on small or medium rat, so I give it small, medium rats all the time. I'll give it a small rat, and then I'll give it a extra large quail, and then I'll give it 3-day-old chicks. I am very much
not trying to constantly push it, but yeah, like
no, me either. Like if I have a snake this wide, I'm not going to say here's a 2-pound rabbit. It's within like the construct of my experience of what they've been, what I've seen a snake able to take. And
I don't want it to look uncomfortable the next day.
Yeah, no, I don't aim for that either.
I think every retic keeper's probably had that one meal where they gave it to like I'm thinking of maybe like a breeder female after like a really big meal, and you're just like, oh, you don't look comfortable. Like you don't need to do that every time you feed your snake.
Yeah, don't do that every time. Yeah, don't do that often, period. But yeah, I do like to switch the sizes. I like to give them really big meals, and then I like to give them 4 weeks off of not eating and let their digestive system like take a break. And then I like to, and that typically that really big meal causes a shed, and then they get to just sit all derpy and I don't know if you've experienced this yet, but sometimes your retics will scare you. You'll come in and think they're dead, but they're really just in shed, and they have their mouth open and they're just laying there.
I promise you, this day will come. I promise.
It will. You'll think your snake is
awful.
Dead. Yeah.
I will be on Discord like immediately.
Yeah, no, it's.
I have pictures in my phone from like several of them from my snakes over the years, and it's just awful every time you walk in and you're just like, wait. Are you? And you like go in and poke them, and they're like, "Oh God, you're
right."
Okay.
And then they're good. I actually recently on the Patreon Discord, I sent a picture of my male ternate. He was in shed and he was laying down sideways. You could see his neck, like you could see the belly scales kind of facing up, and his mouth was just open, and homeboy was just asleep,
kind of like
right, just
like head kind of tilted up, and
he was just passed out. So. But yeah, I think that I think we know that if you, for example, the size that your retic is, like clearly you're not going to pull out a medium rat and be like, let me try this, right? But I would say that like every single time, besides the one time with the Solaire, that I've thought like, is this too big? Is it not? And I'm like, no, let me try it. They've been able to eat it every single time besides that one time. And so don't be scared to give your snake a large meal. It's a retic.
I think general rule of thumb would just be feed it the meals that you're feeding it now until it doesn't look like it's leaving, a substantial lump. And then just size up.
Yeah.
And then repeat the process.
Yeah. That's a very good, like, again, for someone that's type A, right? You want kind of that structure and guideline. Just wait until when you feed that animal, if that bump is gone, almost less than that next day or barely leaves a bump, you're ready to take it to that next size. And you'll sometimes that next size, it'll leave a really big bump, but then your snake goes through that growth spurt and it adjusts and it's able to, retics, I think out of most large constrictors are extremely impressive with the size meals that they can eat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm almost wondering if he's kind of on the verge of needing to size up in like the relatively near future.
What's he on now?
Yeah, he's on hopper mice right now.
Hopper, I guarantee you he could take a small mouse. I also know that if you don't want to go as big as a small mouse, you could go to a rat pup. Guarantee you he'll be absolutely fine with a rat pup.
Yeah, and he might get one soonish. I like to mix those in for my ball python occasionally, so I have a few ready to go if you wanted to try them. But I think it's interesting hearing your perspective with like larger adult snakes where you're already feeding like, several weeks apart. I think sometimes it can almost feel like there's less room for experimentation when you're on that like weekly feeding schedule when they're younger. And I just, as a very new reptile keeper, on one hand, you hear these horror stories of people accidentally making these like really obese, unhealthy retics because they always are looking for food. But at the same time, I also don't, not to anthropomorphize too much, but I don't want to be sitting in there being like, God, I could really use some more food right now. Like these mice are starting to feel a little small,
Right. I think that I don't want to say it's impossible, right? Because it's pretty extreme and that's very black and white. But if someone can show me proof of an obese year to year and a half old retic, I would love to see it because I never have.
That's fair.
They will take that first year and a half. They will take absolutely everything you give it and turn it into growth. At least in my perspective, but at the same time, they are super dwarfs and they're not getting massive meals in the wild. And you don't want to raise a super dwarf on huge meals. That's just not, but also at the same time, realize that like as a baby, because again, if you listen to that feeding episode, I like to feed my, up until 6 months, I like to feed them every 5 days to kind of really build that healthy digestive system. But it's also okay if they have a really big meal and you can give them 2 weeks off.
Okay. And then another thing that I feel like I've been hearing more, and I know it's been discussed a little bit on Discord as well, is it seems like more retic keepers are leaning towards mixing in like a fair amount of birds into their diet rather than just sticking with rodents. And it kind of seems like, it's one of those kind of gray spaces where variety tends to be better than just feeding, one thing or the other. But I was kind of curious if you guys had been like thinking about leaning more towards like feeding more birds or kind of where you fall on that as far as like giving advice to people.
I mean, just in my keeping, I just barely started implementing chicks. I've been primarily rodents and rodents, rabbits, that kind of thing the entire time. So, and why rabbits is just, a big lean source of protein.
Yeah. Yeah. Nathan has always, up until like the last like year and a half that I finally found a good local rabbit resource that, has been able to give me them at a really good price. I've always been jealous at Nathan's ability to feed primarily rabbits because they're a great lean source of protein and a 0.75 pound rabbit, very small rabbit is the equivalent of like a large or extra large rat, but much, much less fat. And so,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think right now, like I'm not even exaggerating. I probably have $500 worth of chicken or quail in my freezers. I have always historically, I was told this from, when I got my Kayuwadi, I think that like the second week I got her back in 2018, I was feeding her day old chicks and switching off and on. And one mistake I've made is, I decided to like just get 2 bags of day old chicks because they're way cheaper than the equivalent size mouse or rat. And,
Yeah.
so she had probably about like 25 of them in a row. And then I found myself having to scent rats and rodents again with chicks to get her back on them. So that's one thing is
They get addicted.
yeah, I mean, I will say that my snake's reactions when I thaw out poultry of any kind, they are nuts. They love it. It's cracked to my retics. And even my carpet pythons, man, I just feel like they hit the quail so much harder. So yeah, I will often make it it's something that I always have in the mix. One thing you just have to keep in mind is chicken and quail are way, way, way more lean. They digest them and break them down a lot quicker. And so your snakes will get hungrier sooner. And if you see feathers in their poop, don't worry. It's just part of the process. It happens. And when you get into larger size chickens, Rodent Pro and other places, they'll cut the feet off for you. But that's just something you want to make because they got some gnarly claws. But yeah, actually, me and James are doing an experiment right now. He bought a Solaire female from me, and I have my holdback Solaire from my clutch, and I'm going to feed, like, let's say we're doing on average 4 meals a month. I'm going to feed 3 rodent, 1 poultry, and he's going to do the opposite. He's going to feed 3 poultry and run 1 rodent, and we're going to just kind of anecdotally observe growth rates and all that good stuff. So we're kind of like scientifically trying to see like what is different.
It'll be interesting to see. I'd be interested to hear how that turns out.
Yeah. And one last thing that I'll add is when you get a large collection, you're feeding a bunch of babies and you have like upwards of 50 to 85 snakes with hatchlings you're feeding. Chickens are your best friend. They are so cheap compared to rodents. Right now, rodents are ridiculously expensive. And so buying chickens right now is I have a lot more in my freezer than usual just because of price of feeders right now. But again, my snakes love them.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I'm definitely also trying to figure out if there's a local source I'm going to be looking into tomorrow when I go to the Kansas City show to see if I can't save a little bit on shipping, but we'll see what that looks like. But they were going to be doing some quail as well, which is something that I've considered mixing in eventually.
Yeah, they love quail. And by the way, I just told Nathan to refresh. He was having some connection issues, but yeah, one trick, and again, a beautiful thing about you is it doesn't seem like you have the intentions of breeding, but one thing that I've always loved about quail is, typically if I have a retic hatchling that is like denied a couple rodents for its first meal, frozen thawed, typically if I offer it quail, they'll take it on site. So I don't know what it is, but I guess there's just something about them that they like.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay. Well,
Yeah,
should I wait for Nathan to come back or just keep rolling?
Yeah, feel free to keep rolling, and he'll come in, and yeah, well, there he is. Let's see if we can bump it back on. Yeah, go ahead, ask the next question.
Cool. So definitely some.
There he is.
Be
Cool.
back.
She was just about to ask the next question. I mean, you're
here.
Yeah, it's a little choppy, but I feel like hopefully it'll get better.
Can you see me now?
Yeah, I can. You're good.
Yes.
Very shaky here. We'll see.
Yeah, but and just in case anyone's realizing that, they're just realizing Nathan's not in his snake room. He's at a buddy's house and his lighting sucks. So just to throw that out there.
I was smooth sailing with the internet just up until the 1.5 hour mark. And I'm just like, why now?
No, you look good now. Like no more pixelation. So.
Well, I was going to say when I was doing my retic research, one of the things that definitely appealed to me is that they seem to be on the hardier side, for reptiles in general, but even for snakes. But just in your experience, are there any kind of like common health issues that tend to pop up or things that tend to be more common for them? And what are like some signs that keepers should be aware of?
I have a feeling I know what Nathan's going to say, so I'll let Nathan take it away.
Shedding issues. It would be one of my biggest concerns just because I'm in Utah. So like just managing their humidity really, really well and bumping it up during the shed cycles, providing a humid hide. And then second, is just probably the pushing.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking you were going to say.
Yeah. The pushing can just lead to impacted teeth and swollen gums and just
pus-filled gums that you have to, express the pus out of. Yeah, pushing leads to the health issues. So yeah. Anything you want to add before I go, Nate?
You have a lot more you can add.
Yeah, I think that like I haven't dealt with a lot of like really health issues. One thing that I will say, like to add on to what Nathan said about shed issues, right? So shed issues oftentimes can come from dry, conditions. They can also come from, people will say like, yeah, my Govee or my sensor push is reading 60%, 70% humidity all the time, and it's still not having good sheds. So a lot of people think that sheds are only related to humidity when in fact it's hydration. That's actually way more important.
I like getting water on that animal. You'll actually see them start to drink it off themselves when they aren't necessarily as inclined to go to their water bowl.
Right. One of our Patreon members, Jamie, she got her first retic from me, and it's never had shed issues with me, and she's struggling with shed issues, and she's keeping it in a beautiful Exoterra type of enclosure and with a heat lamp and stuff like that. And I told her, I said, even if the humidity in there is like 60-70%, you're using a heat lamp, and if it's sitting under the heat lamp, it's drying up its scales, it's drying up the insides. It's so I started recommending to her to soak the animal twice a week for 45 minutes to an hour in shallow water to actually hydrate, right? So yeah, pushing, just to talk on pushing, when pushing happens, there's something going wrong. So it can either be a husbandry issue, heat, it could be an enclosure size issue. I've had some hatchlings outgrow the racks. I've had to take that step up. Like oftentimes the biggest cue that they've outgrown the rack is they'll start pushing when they've never pushed before. Pushing can lead to, you'll look at your snake and you'll see like a swollen throat when it's breathing. And oftentimes people think that that's respiratory infection related, like an upper respiratory infection. But in reality, what's happening is that its ventral scales and it's where it breathes out of, and its nose are so swollen that when it's breathing air out, it's not going out, smoothly. And it's causing the air to dispel slowly, and it causes this bubble. But the only other thing that I've dealt with as far as health issues, besides what happened to Dwayne too, I had to put down, and we still don't know what the hell happened, but I've had some snakes catch some very early signs of respiratory infections. Respiratory infections can happen from it being way too humid and wet and bacteria growing. Respiratory infections can also happen from it being way too dry. If you think about like the inside of our bodies need to be well lubricated and hydrated, especially our lungs. And so even if it's too dry, you can start to see the onset of respiratory symptoms. It takes a lot more in retics than it does others, but once that like very onset stage starts, I always recommend people just like bump up that hot spot and get it on a clean paper if you're using bedding, because again, bacteria is what builds up an infection, right? So you want to minimize the introduction of bad bacteria.
Yeah. And what would some of those like early warning signs of an RI look like?
So for a snake that doesn't push at all, you don't ever see it pushing, is that throat swelling.
They're
you
going
might
to be opening their mouth. They're going to be making noises, like trying to expel.
Yeah. They'll be trying to like cough out, right? What's weird is, this can happen from dusty bedding too, but oftentimes you'll hear like your retic cough. And so you'll hear your retic cough or the throat or just like, so retics are loud breathers, and a lot of people that get like a larger retic for their first one, they'll be holding it and be like, I think my snake has an RI because I can hear it breathing. No, like retics, you'll hear them breathing once they get bigger, but it's when you hear them breathing and you kind of hear a little bit of that crackling. And then also what a lot of people I don't think ever mention too often is it's a weird experience. So there's two different type of respiratory infections. There's upper respiratory infection and lower respiratory infection. So the upper respiratory infections typically what causes like the bubbling and the swollen throat and the coughing. Lower respiratory infections, the way that you can tell is when you're holding them and you're holding their body, you'll kind of feel like fluid in their body. You'll feel like a swooshing, and that's like the excess fluid that's building up in their lungs. And so with a larger retic, it's much easier to tell. Very hard to tell that way with a younger retic. But if you feel sloshing towards like their towards the bottom of that first third or their midsection, that's a good indication. And again, I don't know about you, Nathan. I don't know if you've had any snakes in experience with respiratory infections, but their behavior's a little off too.
I mean, I've had snakes that are having like tough sheds and do the coughing, but you bump up humidity, they get through the shed, they're good.
Yeah.
But no, respiratory infection and actual respiratory infection never had to deal with besides Burmese. Yeah. But I mean, I don't think it was a lower, so I didn't hear any of that sloshing.
Yeah, so I've never had to treat for a respiratory infection for any of my retics. I've never actually had to give them antibiotics for a respiratory infection, and that's because, again, going back to once you bump that heat up and you get them on a clean paper like bedding, and then Nathan could probably attest to this from the pushing side, but the magic cure for retics is you give them a really big meal and you let them shed, and typically after they shed, they're good.
Yep, pretty much.
But that's not to say don't take health issues into your own hands. Go see a vet.
Okay. So since we're focusing a little bit more on like keeping as pets specifically, I would love to kind of get your thoughts. And this is mostly coming from me just always being anxious that my animals are actually like, happy and enjoying themselves as much as, that's how they actually feel about the situation. But what are kind of some general signs that your pet retic is thriving and enjoying its environment versus you maybe needing to look into making some adjustments?
Pushing's the first one. Yeah, pushing's the biggest thing, and like glass surfing. And then If your retic looks squished into the enclosure, it's probably time to upgrade your enclosure.
Yeah.
It shouldn't ever be just a retic, a water bowl, and that's it.
Yeah. Catherine, can you please send me the picture right now on Discord of your enclosure so we could just get it up?
I will try to find a good photo. I have not been good about taking photos recently.
What? I'm the complete, like, I literally took my Fujifilm in my garage today and was in there for 2 hours. But I also like just photography in general, so that's probably why. But
the really sad thing is I literally have a photography degree.
Oh my gosh, Catherine.
Just squandering it. I have lots of cute pictures of my retic in the enclosure. I do not have. Oh, I do have a wide angle. I lied. You just want me to send this to Discord?
Yeah, send it on Discord, and then I'm gonna send it to Nathan's Instagram. But in the meantime, I'll answer your question.
What channel do you want me to just direct message it to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
how do I know if he's happy?
Yeah, how do you determine if your pet is thriving, or if you need to make some changes? So what I like to see out of thriving animals is healthy body weight composition, right? So there's a very distinct separation between, you know, the head and the neck and the body. You know, if the midsection is the same thickness all the way up to the neck, you're overfeeding your retic. Next thing I like to see in a thriving retic is consistently decent sheds, right? Once your retics get to a larger, even I'm talking about even 7-8 feet, right? Which is where most super dwarfs will absolutely hit. And beyond that, just, you know, sheds that aren't just like broken apart like crazy, right? Because again, a good shed, even if it's in 3 pieces, but it's not flaked up, a good shed indicates proper humidity levels and proper hydration. Third thing I like to see with my retics that you know it's thriving is if it doesn't hate you. If your snake is constantly trying to bite you defensively, if your snake does not want to interact with you, then there's something about the environment or your body language that is causing that snake to be terrified of you. And any snake that is terrified of their owner is not a thriving snake. Now, again, there are imported animals that make that massive adjustment that sometimes never make the adjustment, right? But we're talking about retics that by now we're mostly several generations in. And even with my F1 Halmaheras and Ternates, they're not scared of me. I'm more scared of them, I promise. So yeah, it's their behavior, right? And I'll give a good example of, like, you know, Nathan said, a good indication that they're not thriving is pushing, right? But I actually have only one experience.
Yeah, that's the first thing.
Right, yeah, absolutely. But I actually have only one experience with one of my retics, my male Solaire, who was the sire of the clutch in January. He never pushes. However, when I'm in the garage and start walking past his enclosure, I'm not thawing any food out, right? But it's just not his day to clean. And he will push like no end. And when I finally open up his enclosure to get him to stop, all he wants to, not food response, nothing. He literally comes right out to us. So I guess to say that, like, I think a retic that's thriving in your collection, as social as they are, is going to, again, they're not going to be like, hey buddy, let's go on a date, right? I'm not trying to anthropomorphize them, but wow, Nathan, I said the word. I said it without butchering it. I did it. But it's a snake that at times is going to seek your interaction because retics are social animals.
You want to see them coming out to you. You don't want to see them stressed out when you're, you know, interacting with them or walking up to their enclosure. You want to just, you know, see them curious, happy, exploring.
Yeah, and one more thing to add, your snake is thriving if it is growing. You know, I want to just emphasize that because so many people get super dwarfs and you know, and not even intentionally, but just are not providing it the caloric the caloric intake to produce healthy growth. So if you look at your snake and it's the same size, or, you know, if you came from the ball python world and you weigh your snakes and your retic has not gained any weight in like a 3 to 6 month period, your snake's not thriving. You're not feeding it enough. Retics are, I don't care if they're super dwarfs. Retics grow. That's what they do. Again, super dwarf is a term to describe a smaller version of the longest snake species in the world. So if your snake has, you take pictures of your snake and it's nearly the same size from year 2 to year 3, you probably need to feed it. And growth is a way of thriving, as long as body composition is good.
Okay. Well, and then last question for you guys. Something that was kind of front of my mind, again, like owning a pit bull. We talk a lot about, being a positive ambassador for the breed, trying to prevent, additional laws and restrictions being put into place. How would you say that, keepers and especially new keepers can be good ambassadors, both for retics and just for reptile keeping in general?
Show off those cool enclosures. Show off your good interactions with the animals. If you have a bad interaction, unless you're creating some very important educational piece of content for it, keep it to yourself. That's, I think, very basic. Very, very basic. And then just thrive to provide as much as you can for the animal, and thrive to see that animal enjoying its experience with you as best you can, with it being housed in a box with you. Oh, Lucas.
Oh, no.
Good job, bud. Good job.
All right, guys. Good night. Have a good one. Oh man, damn it! And I just tried calling you out earlier. That's the first time I've done that in a bit, but
that's why I let you talk for a second. I was like,
I'm disappointed because I was so
second.
excited for this answer, and now I'm just like, meh.
I was like, I bet he's saying something good too.
Oh, man.
Share your wisdom.
Yeah, I wisdom. My 6 years of retic keeping. So with that being, I think that, Nathan talked about the social media aspect. I really think that a lot of people can underestimate the power of what can be done on social media. As many bad things as there are about social media, there are equally as many good things. And so to be a good ambassador is to show your retic on a clutch of eggs striking at you and putting your finger into cut eggs and ripping them out. No, don't do that. That's not being a good ambassador, right? But what we can do to be a good ambassador is when you have, a retic or you have a reptile and you've worked with it and it's socialized, share the videos. And
the best thing I would say is get a kid involved.
Dude. So exactly. But I guess it's
like I can't tell you how many times bringing a snake to a reptile show at a booth, or just having a snake out in the yard and having positive interactions and just educating people who are curious about them. I think that goes a long way. I think much further than our reach to the people on social media who are already looking for reptile content anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of those things where, there's 100 ways that we can not be good ambassadors, but really being good ambassadors is like, if you are doing it right and you have the beautiful enclosures, which, speaking of beautiful enclosures, I'm about to message Nathan on Instagram and we're going to show your amazing enclosures.
You better hurry.
Yeah, no, we're getting there. So
I also really appreciate that. That was definitely a labor of love.
No, it's literally like, it's phenomenal. And so here's my being an ambassador and a positive influence in the reptile community. You don't have to be doing this for a long time. It could be someone like you that's only been doing this for a year, but because you have these incredible enclosures, because you're building and working on trust with your animals, just sharing that, which again goes back to like the positive influence that social media can have, because we see the negative side on social media. And the only way that we can really change people's perspective on these animals, which I think is, I think all of us have the desire to I don't know, maybe it's just me. I have when people are terrified of snakes, I have a desire to help them lose that fear because they're right. And so we can do that by showing the interactions. You look at, again, second or third time we've mentioned her, the curly haired keeper, Abby. Abby is such a phenomenal ambassador, and she does nothing more
about the idea. I mean, some people don't want to hear about them at all.
I have coworkers.
Some people are somewhat interested.
Yeah, I have coworkers that I'm like, would you like to see a picture of them? When they're like, you breed snakes? I'm like, yeah, would you like to see? And they're literally like, absolutely not. Like, they're like, they can't even see a picture of a snake.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I try to be very respectful of that, but
my buddy's mom can't see me without asking, do you have a snake?
Right, exactly.
In my pocket, just right here.
I made a joke like that earlier today.
I got a buddy.
I'm sure.
I got a buddy every single time that he sees me, and he's back in Florida. It's one of my best friends. He's like, you ever bring one of your snakes around me? I got a shovel. And I'm like, again, like I'll kill you.
Yeah, I don't tolerate that.
Yeah, I know that. I draw my line. I know that he's getting. He says it because he knows it bugs me, but and I think one last way, and we'll wrap at least this question up, unless Nathan, you have something else. To be a good ambassador is, Nathan kind of touched on it, is getting kids involved. But if you have the opportunity to go out and do outreach and to go to schools or to do community stuff, or like Nathan is teach like, hey,
local firefighters how to deal with a larger python in case of a fire, like. That's a cool thing to do, and it's very possible it happened in my town.
Good
idea.
Oh
wow.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff you can do owning these animals that can do a lot of good for your community.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been kind of happy to see that like at least some people in my life are becoming like more interested in hearing about them, or they might like ask about them occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple friends, and I also have some personal training clients that I work with who actually told me that they really want to watch this episode when it comes out, because they want to hear about the snakes. And I was like, I don't know if you quite know what you're getting into, but I love that the interest is at least there, which at least makes me feel like I'm doing something right. Where I'm like, okay, they're starting to seem a little less scary.
Curiosity, right?
I tell everyone about. Oh, go ahead, Lucas.
No, go. You were.
That's what I tell everyone in my personal life about the podcast. Anyway, it's like, hey, I appreciate the interest, but I promise it's not for you.
Right, and I mean, I think that okay, the moment that we can take fear to curiosity, I got them. Like the moment that you are just slightly interested, like I promise you're going to lose this fear much quicker than you think you are, and that's the big thing. Is just finding a way to get them to be curious instead of irrationally fearful. But before we wrap up, Catherine, I'm going to have Nathan kind of pull up the Instagram, pull up the images, just so that we can show how. Yeah, they're on your Instagram.
Oh, they're on. Oh, I was like, where did he send them?
Yeah, Instagram messages. But while he's pulling that up, Catherine, you asked some phenomenal questions.
Thank you.
Like thought-provoking, deep questions that we can go back to these questions, literally make episodes of them. So thank you, and thank you for being willing, because I know that
it says I can only open them in the mobile app for whatever reason.
Okay, how about Messenger?
Shoot them.
that's worked before. But what I will say is that
I mean, let's. I feel like at this point, like for just retention's sake, we should just put it in the middle of the episode
I'm
when
going
we're talking
to,
about it.
I'm going to, but I feel like I want to just like for a minute,
Like
just
no one's
appreciate
gonna
them.
see it at this point, and I feel sad.
But I know that you went out of your comfort zone to come on. I know that when we talked on our Patreon Zoom call that you were, you're like, I don't know. And, I'm glad you did. Can I ask you real quick before we hang up with you? Was it as bad as you thought? Or how the nerves?
Oh no. I mean, I didn't honestly think it was going to be terrible. I mean, I've had a chance to talk to you guys on Zoom calls before. And I mean, also just when do I get a chance to just talk about snakes nonstop for like 2 hours to
Right.
like someone who's actually interested and not me just being like, okay, just let me talk about this cool snake morph I saw for 5 minutes and just pretend that you're interested, So this has been great. And I do think you guys are doing a really cool thing. And,
Thank you.
I've mentioned to you before, I mean, this, especially those early episodes, I got some very critical information that was very helpful to me figuring out if this was going to be a good pet for me.
Right.
So, it's been very helpful, and, hopefully some of this has been helpful to someone else as well.
Yeah.
So
your
as
cages.
we exit out
Your
that
cages.
beautiful enclosure
For a tiny
that
noodle.
we are definitely going to have Lucas edit into the middle.
I'm going to.
Because we love him.
No, that means a lot to me. I put a lot of work. There was a lot of trial and error going into getting those stupid branches up.
Like a lot of love went into it.
But he loves it. He's never on the ground. He's always on that branch. He eats up there.
So
he's
awesome.
Oh, I love watching him eat from ledges. That's my favorite.
He pretty much exclusively eats hanging from one of the branches, like not even on the ledge. Like his last feeding, he was upside down on a branch. He just happy as can be.
The picture that we're using for the thumbnail, because it hasn't been made yet, is the your green tree retic, right? That picture of it, perched like a chondro. But yeah. So I just want to say, thank you for being a great example for new retic keepers and for new people getting interested in them, of putting the love, time, and energy into an amazing enclosure and spending the time to obsessively research about them. And I think that as new as you are, you're an asset to our Patreon, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. And shout out to the Patreon group. That I know you guys talk about it a lot, but seriously, the Discord is worth the $5 a month. So
I try telling people that it's only $5.
Do it. It's a steal of a deal. Just do it.
Exactly. And if you don't even like retics, we're starting to talk a lot more about other snakes. So
we're going to try to kind of minimize that a little bit, I think. But
I agree.
But it's still pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Catherine, we'll hang up with you.
Coming on.
Yeah, we'll.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah, we'll see you next weekend on our Patreon Zoom.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Bye. All right, Nate, take us away.
That was a fun one. No, I love these reverse interviews. I'm glad that we kind of started this format.
Me too.
No, I'm in for the night. I think I'm gonna catch the last few minutes of the main card the buddies pause for me, and I'm gonna call it a night. Lucas, what are you up to?
I am gonna be kind of working on the back scenes podcast stuff, and probably gonna play some COD before bed. So
okay.
If you guys do want to join the Patreon, that link is down there. And then one last thing that I'll say before we wrap up is if any of you guys want to make ridiculous AI rap or heavy metal songs about the Retic Lounge, send them our way and we'll play them at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, we'll definitely accept those. So look forward to it. See you guys.
See ya.